Hello, everybody. Welcome back to HavoKast. Today, we are going to jump into the legendary season 4 of Seinfeld. Now, I love this show. I love the history of the show. This season was just unprecedented and incredible. They did a lot of different things that sitcoms hadn't done at the time. We're definitely going to talk a little bit about that and then just kind of go into each episode here. Do a little recap of the episode or talk about it a little bit and then kind of rank them in order. It's just got so much good stuff, so much continuity, so many callbacks. It was the first time a sitcom had really had a whole arc across the entire season. Now, the first 3 seasons of Seinfeld were interesting because season 1 was just kind of a funny show. Season 2, there was a little bit more storytelling. The characters were a little more defined. And again, it's just kind of a funny show. A little more, I guess, relatable than other shows at the time, but still, it kind of was growing into its thing. Season 3 is where you started to see it hit its stride, and you kind of saw what the show was going to be. Very relatable, very interesting, a lot of character building, some world building, and then season 4, they just threw it all out there. So you have 1 and 2 part episodes. You have, like I say, callback episodes, continuing jokes throughout the whole season. So you really have to watch this whole season in order. Some episodes have their own kind of individual storytelling, but there's a lot of like parts that move throughout the whole season, which is, I think, hilarious. That's my kind of humor that I really enjoy too, is like, oh yeah, I remember that. And here it is again in a different context. We're going to get into that later on and show you kind of where that comes together. But I absolutely love this season. It is so good. And then this is where Seinfeld really just hits its peak. I mean, the next few seasons after this, up until season 7, are just so damn good. Season 7's good, but it's definitely one of those where you kind of have to either be into it or not. And then season 8 and 9 of Seinfeld were very out there, just kind of wacky and wild, but a little more modern feel too. When you watch them, it feels like a little bit like it took a step forward, even though it's still like the, mid to late 90s. So just interesting stuff all around. But yeah, I love this season. We'll talk about everything here. We're going to go in order. We're just going to kind of give them like different tier rankings here based on where they are in the season chronologically. So we have episode 1 to, I think, episode 24 down here. I believe it's either 24 or somewhere around there, but either way. S, of course, is just absolute God tier episodes. A, B, C, they're all good in their own ways. Better up here. You know how tier list works. F is reserved for just like, I almost don't even want to watch the episode. Now this season's interesting though, because like the whole season is so good. I'm going to be highly like scrutinizing these episodes. So like these shows and episodes that came out here, they're so good. They could stand up to the best of any other season. But because we're in our own season here, you can't just put everything in S and A. You have to make sure everything else has a place, B, C, D, F, that kind of thing. And I'm going to be pretty tough on some of these. We're going to start with The Trip, Part 1. And this is where they go to L.A. to find Kramer after he left with the keys, where the last season kind of ends off, and then they pick up this season. There's a lot of great moments on this one. A lot of very quotable moments as well. The first part is very good. I'm going to probably put this at a B. The only reason I'm having it at a B for the most part is because the characters are kind of disconnected in this one. And for me, it lacks a little bit of that familiarity. It's cool to see them out doing other things. And it was hilarious all the way through. There's a lot of great like jokes and, George getting just absolutely roasted on that late night show. It's just so good. The scene where they're in the police car is one of the best scenes in the entire franchise, I'd say. And I believe that was The Trip Part 2, I think, is when they were actually in the police car and everything. So they discover Kramer is wanted during the trip, right? So there's a lot of great stuff here, but there's also a lot of great stuff here in The Trip Part 2, which is why if it was one episode and it was all condensed into one, it would probably be a little higher. But The Trip Part 2, just that police scene alone, I'm going to put right here next to B also. They always have very strong parts. Again, very disconnected though, but there was a lot of great jokes. There's just so many subtle humor jokes across this whole season. And this one, they mix a lot of like outlandish with a lot of subtle. And I think it's just so great. But then we're going to move on. These two are kind of a package deal anyway. But definitely going to move on because the pitch, I mean, it's about as close to S as you can get without it being in the S tier. When they pitch the whole idea for the show Jerry, which is essentially like how Seinfeld kind of came about. The cool thing about this season is it focuses around Jerry getting a sitcom. And it's almost like it's telling the story of how Seinfeld became a thing, but also it's still the funny show Seinfeld is. So there's so much depth in this one, and so it's very interesting. It's almost it's just so introspective as well, which I love because there's a lot of self-deprecating humor about the show and everything like that. I mean, it's so good. And the only reason it's not higher is just because there's so many other really, really great episodes in this thing. It's just, seeing the way they interact in the meeting and George panicking, and then a show about nothing is just so freaking iconic. It's just such a great episode all around. But I absolutely love this episode. I think that also all the characters kind of like interacting about the show, like Kramer trying to do, his little acting bit and stuff like that, and then wanting to be on the show. George more concerned about dating Susan than like actually how the pitch went and everything. It's just so typical. It's great. It's a great episode. It's going to sit here at A tier for sure. I'm also doing this tier list style too, just because like I think we can kind of rank them in order as we go, but like I want to kind of break down where the episode stands with what I like as well. And it's something that I feel like I should have been doing for a lot of the Seinfeld rankings, just because there's a lot of episodes. And, saying like on this, for instance, like my least favorite episode is way behind the, my next least favorite episode, which is actually pretty decent in my opinion. Because there's one that stands out here that I just absolutely can't stand. The other ones are so good, but it's like, saying one is 24 and the next one is 23, even though they're not technically right next to each other. Like I can't stand one. Like that's, I just feel like there's a big discrepancy. So I kind of want to do it tier list style from now on. But yeah, so the ticket, this one is also really freaking good. It's another in the line of, just developing the characters with Joe Davola and everything like that. He attacks Kramer and Kramer's all weird and everything like that. I think the pitch is better, like way better. So we're probably going to have some stuff in between the ticket and the pitch. I think the better versions of the episode, or the better episodes, are going to go over here, and the lower tier ones are going to go over this side. But yeah, the ticket is great. Again, good world building. I don't think until later on in the season that the same crazy Joe Davola is now dating Elaine. Yeah, and it's just so funny how her dating her therapist or whatever at the time is kind of what is the catalyst for Joe Davola having that break. I mean, it's just, I love the way they all kind of intertwine. It's such a metaphor for life, like the butterfly effect and everything like that, which maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it is just a masterful season all the way through. So I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. The next one, The Wallet. I love this episode. It's got to be up top here. It's probably lower in the tier S category. But God, it's just so funny. It's another one of these like kind of 1 and 2 part things with The Watch as well. And The Watch is good also, but man, I have not laughed out loud a whole lot just at shows in general. But Morty Seinfeld yelling "My wallet's gone" is just the best thing. It's so funny. Again, we got more like pilot stuff happening in here. It's just such a play on how life is. And it's a lot of this episode is kind of saying what we're all thinking for the most part, which I think is really fun, really cool. The Watch, I'll probably put that at high A also. Maybe even a little lower than the pitch even. I know they're kind of like 1 and 2 part episodes. I do like The Watch, and I like that there's a couple of parts in here where things kind of click and come together. But I think for the most part, this feels more like a wrap-up episode for this one. It's still got some funny bits. It's still got some like ironic, cringy moments, which is Seinfeld humor and Larry David humor in general. But the wallet sets up a lot of that, and you kind of know the payoff is coming. So it's a great episode. I'm going to keep it an A. I definitely think it's better than The Trip because you have all the characters and everything like that. Better than The Ticket because The Ticket, it's kind of more of a world building episode with a kind of side tangent and some Newman stuff happening. So there's some good stuff going on in here. I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, but I'm putting The Bubble Boy at C. The reason I'm putting it at C is because it's kind of more of a setup episode than anything else. There's some iconic moments in there when they're interacting with the Bubble Boy and, the Moops and the Moors and all that. Some great George and Susan before they became like a real thing later on in the season or sitcom's life. Season 7 is what I'm trying to say. I don't know what the hell's going on, but yeah. So, that great interaction stuff. It ends on the most ridiculous thing when they burn the cabin down and everything. Oh my God. The best scene in this, though, I think, is in the beginning when Jerry gets the answering machine message from George, and he has to rip it out of the wall, and he's just like, damn thing never worked right, or something like that. And it's so funny because his girlfriend hears just George and, Jerry, essentially, their inside jokes about her. So that's one of the best scenes in there. I think it overshadows the rest of the episode. But I also just like the diner part. It kind of comes to a halt. There's some funny moments in there, but I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of them going into the country to the cabin. I think that whole thing just feels a little too disjointed for me. But other than that, there are some great moments in here. Like I said, people love that episode too. I think it's a good episode. Again, these episodes are going to be top tier over any other sitcom and most Seinfeld episodes in all of their seasons. But because season 4 is just so good, I have to move them kind of around, Now we get to the Cheever letters here, which I think is a very clever episode. I love the dinner part. I love when, oh my God, the Jerry and George at Susan's apartment when the letters are discovered and Susan's father's affair and everything like that. It just, the faces they made are so good. There's so many great parts throughout this whole thing. I think the offending of Elaine's assistant and everything, like Jerry has to then sweet talk her and all that. It's just very, I don't know. It's, if you've ever been in a situation where you have said something that seems like it's not really a big deal in context, but someone takes it in a big deal, that feeling. And so it's just so relatable. But Cheever letters, I think, is going to be a low B. I really like this episode a lot more than some of the other ones, but I do think there's a little bit of a pacing issue in here. Still very, very good. The opera, funny or not, the episode is so smart and so well written. I'm going to put it above The Watch even, and it's this very big payoff moment of when everybody finds out who Joey Elaine is dating is also Joe Davola, and it's just, I mean, the continuity of this season is so good, and it's just so much of a payoff here. But there's a lot of pop culture and historical references as well, which is something Seinfeld's kind of lesser known for, but they do is reference in a lot of historical moments and memories and things. Or kind of touch on hot topics in the political climate and stuff without being too upfront about it. So it's just a very underratedly smart show, and the opera feels very good to that whole sense thing. The Virgin is a very good episode, and I'm going to probably not put it that high. I'll probably put it mid-A also. Another really good one. It's more of a setup again, but the interaction between Susan and George, there's just so much in here that's so good. The conversations they have, again, very relatable and realistic to a lot of situations. But the big thing about this one is it's just kind of well paced. It comes and goes. It's definitely got its moments, but it sets up so much of the next episode and so much throughout everything else that I think it's just kind of, it's pretty necessary, I think. in the grand scheme of the season. But the contest is the one I mean, you guys know it's got to be one of the best in the whole franchise, the whole show. But the contest is just too good. It's been mocked and parodied and redone a million times over. This one is just so freaking funny. If you watch this whole season all the way through, they're going to reference it again later on. And I mean, you just like every line in this one is so iconic. Every moment, every subtle look that George does, or the things Kramer does, or even down to just the color of the shirts they're wearing in the apartment, like there's so much referenced and so much going on. It's a fantastically written episode. Maybe one of the best ever written kind of sitcom episodes. And the way they had to touch around, it's actually interesting. The way they had to touch around talking about this stuff, but still implying what they were referencing in the episode is so interesting because of network television's guidelines. So, I mean, there's just so much that kind of went into this behind the scenes, and it's always very interesting to kind of look at and figure out. But yeah, they weren't allowed to say certain things, so they had to kind of dance around, and it was just so clever the way they would kind of reference it and the faces they would make to get together, and talk about this stuff. It just was incredible, just amazing. The airport, this episode's kind of funny, but honestly, like, I don't love this one as much as I love some of the other ones in this season. I'm going to probably move. I mean, it's a very good episode, but for me personally, I think it's going to be the top of the C tier probably. I like a lot of the interaction between George and Kramer, and then Jerry and Elaine being separated in first class and coach was kind of funny, but I didn't love that. The airplane to me felt like Jerry and Elaine being on the airplane to me, it just kind of drags. Like, I like George and Kramer. They're like the high point where they're running around and, things are distracting them, or they're bouncing between both airports, whatever. It feels very frantic and just kind of hectic. And I enjoy that, the energy of it. Plus the jokes and things they were kind of bouncing off of each other were very good. But the plane, it's just such a different world. It's such a lag for me for the episode. I do think it's good. It's got its great moments. I like it better than the Bubble Boy for the same kind of reasons I don't like the Bubble Boy. I feel like the airport's a little bit better in those areas, but it's just going to stay a little higher. Still a good one, but definitely going to be in the C. The pick, the pick to me, I think it's a weird episode to categorize because I do like George's kind of regret of breaking up with Susan and everything. And then at the end, he's kind of like, oh no, what have I done or whatever. And it's like, there's some great moments and things like that. The Christmas card though, and Kramer and everything like that, it's just a league above everything. Like Jerry's story in here is kind of the weak point with the girl he met on the plane and everything like that. But then you also get Kramer setting up, needing the Calvin Klein invitation and everything like that. It all comes full circle. So it's a very like up and down episode for me. I think it's going to be probably in the B tier, maybe above. Yeah, let's put it above the Trip. I think as a whole episode, there's a lot of good in here, a lot of iconic stuff. The fact that Jerry's so like out of it though, for me is just kind of where it stands. George isn't as strong in this one. I mean, he has a role. It's good. George is good in every role. Jason Alexander was a master of his comedic craft and timing. But him and Jerry having a lesser role, and the Kramer and Elaine stuff. Like, I like Kramer and Elaine in this too. I like them a lot, but in this season, a lot of the characters were so on their game at the same time. It just kind of is like, to be missing a couple of key roles is tough. But I do like this episode a lot. Again, very iconic moments in here. The whole season's iconic, though, so really does that matter? I don't know. The movie is interesting because it's, again, got some pretty quotable things in here. It centers around the characters not making a movie on time or missing, being at different theaters and stuff like that. Probably more relatable back in the day than it is now. So for me, it just kind of falls a little flatter. I don't hate this episode. I think it's decent. I think if we have a D tier, I think this is going to be the high D tier though. Again, very quotable. It sets up like some other things throughout, but I just think it's such a weak kind of story across the whole thing that I don't feel it as much. Probably high D, low C maybe, but just for the sake of argument, I'm going to keep it at D because, like, again, there's so much good in this season. The Visa is another D, I think. It's a lower point in the season for sure. It's just it feels more like a filler episode. I mean, it plays on Babu Bhatt losing or not having his visa renewal because Jerry was away and nobody checked the mail and stuff like that. So it feels almost more tragic than funny. The Kramer going to the fantasy baseball camp and getting kicked out was pretty good, but again, just kind of one of those things where it hits you and then it's like, okay, there's not as incredibly written humor in these as they have in the other ones, which I get. They're not mainline story arc episodes. During this season, though, there was a lot of, like I say, callbacks and things like that. So each episode had an arc for the characters, and then the story overall across the whole season had one. And, it was just like the episodes that don't play into it feel a little out of place. It's kind of like, it's nice that you have these little like one-off episodes here and there. If you guys watch Doctor Who at all, it's the same kind of deal with that, where you would have a few that kind of continued the overall story and plot, but then, there'd be a one-off episode here or there where it was just kind of like, oh, this is just a fun little side quest kind of deal. That's literally how this one feels. It's just kind of like, okay, it's there, it's funny, but, only in some places. The shoes. Now this episode's always kind of bothered me a little bit. It all again feels more like a story progressor than an actual episode that's dedicated just to being funny. Now there were some good moments in here. There were some funny moments, some interesting moments and things, but for the most part, again, it's just one of those like filler episodes. I'm going to put it at D, and I'm going to put it lower than the Visa because they were on kind of a cold streak during this 3 episode run. The movie is way better than these two, in my opinion, but still, it just doesn't stand up to like anything up here. The Outing, then you come back and you just absolutely blow it away. This is probably one of the best comedic episodes ever written. I have to put it at number 1 for now. I don't know if there's anything that's going to beat it, honestly, but this one is just so damn funny. It's so heavily quotable. It's so like uniquely progressive as well for the time without it being too overtly in your face. It's just, joke after joke, situation after situation. The Outing is just an absolutely legendary episode. It has me laughing literally all the time, and I don't know. It just blows my mind that somebody could write stuff like this. It's so great. Which is funny because then we flip the script down to The Old Man, which is one of my least favorite episodes in the entire franchise. I cannot stand it. The whole idea of, visiting the elderly and then, it's like almost like elderly abuse. Not really, but, it feels kind of like it. It's one of those things where it's just not as fun to me. It's not as funny or interesting. It just doesn't make sense, a lot of it. The records and stuff was the only kind of interesting, funny part in the record store. And even that was kind of like, all right, that's a little slapsticky and a little stupid for, what Seinfeld typically is. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this episode at all. I feel like it's just another, it literally is a filler. It has nothing to do with the rest of the season for the most part. And it's just kind of, it's just kind of there. The Implant, that's a very good episode. I like it. I don't think it's a top tier. Again, there's a pretty quotable line in here. They're real and they're spectacular. Some good moments here and there. I'm going to probably put it at high B though. It's a good episode, but for the most part, it's kind of like ironic, kind of interesting how it develops a little bit more backstory between Jerry and Elaine. Not that anybody's super interested though anyway, so it's kind of just glossed over for the most part. But yeah, the Salman Rushdie bit and everything like that, again, kind of interesting, kind of weird and out there, but it's just for me one of those episodes that I think more people like it than I do, and it's one that I never go, you know what, I want to watch that one, you know? Like if it comes on, I'll watch it, but I'm going for these. I'm even going for some of these before that one, but you know, like the airport for me is a more enjoyable episode than this one, than the implant. But the implant is funnier at times, so I think it is a better episode than the airport. But you know, it's just kind of how you feel, I guess, on everything like that. Another one that I'm gonna probably put up here in the top. Man, it's tough to see if I want it probably before the wallet. I think the wallet goes first. The wallet feels like a little bit of a smarter episode. The humor is kind of in different levels. The Junior Mint's just great, though. I love this episode. It's so funny. You know, the again, tying the Junior Mints and some of the key lines in throughout the whole episode is great. I love the way they do it. Just super, super fun to watch this episode. And I think, you know, you can even see Jerry just trying to contain his laughter throughout a lot of it. But they go through a whole lot of emotions without it being too, like, crazy and over the top. Elaine's, like, just absolute 360, going from, oh, this guy's kind of gross, I don't want to date him, to, oh, wow, I kind of do want to date him now, he looks great. And then back to, oh, he's kind of a slob, maybe I won't date him. I love the progression through that. I love that Jerry kind of gives it to her for being that way, which is ironic because he is as well. But yeah, I mean, just the whole thing is just very, very compelling all the way through. It's a good episode all the way through, which I really appreciate because, you know, a lot of times, again, some of these episodes down here, they lag in places, or not every character has like the strongest script or anything, which again, it's not really a George heavy episode. But the George with the art that he buys and everything like that it's ironic, it's funny, and it's honestly pretty damn relatable because he bought the art, you know, thinking, oh, if the guy dies, the art will go up in value and everything like that, and I'll just have this. It's kind of like what a lot of people think with, like, you know, collecting cards or whatever it is. It's like, oh God, you know, I might hold on to this because it might be valuable someday. And it's like, okay, but how practical is that? How realistic? You're basically just gambling at that point, and that's, you know, George in a nutshell. The smelly car, you know, it's one that's grown on me for sure. I want to put it at like high B, or I mean, high C, low B, but probably high C, just because like it is a very unique, weird episode. It's a very one-off kind of episode, but I like it. I think it's so goofy, but it's so funny at the same time. Now the body odor is just kind of like from person to person, and then when they trap the guy in the car to like try to get him to pay for the cleaning, it's just so funny. Again, you know, playing off each other. Elaine's hair and the interior of the car get washed at the same time with what seems like the same care and routine. Just, you know, the parallels they draw are so great, and I think it's a hilarious episode, but I do think it's pretty one-dimensional. I do think it's lacking a little something. And for that, I just have it, a little lower than the rest of them. Again, it could be a little higher. I could see it being higher. But for me, it's just kind of down here. Now, the handicap spot is interesting because this is when I believe you're first introduced to Jerry Stiller and George's dad, in Seinfeld. Now, it was originally not played by Jerry Stiller, but Jerry Stiller had to kind of, I don't know how they did it, but superimpose him on or re-record it with him in there. So you start getting a little bit more dynamic with the characters and the tertiary characters and things like that. Obviously, it became a huge role later on. But the funniest part about the handicap spot is that it mirrors what they're trying to pitch in the Jerry episode when the pilot comes out, is that George has to be his dad's butler because of the destroyed car. There's so much that happens in this episode. I really like it. I'm going to put it at a high B because it is a very like kind of low key one-dimensional episode. Not that it's that bad. I don't mind that, but just the wheelchair thing, Kramer having to get the secondhand used wheelchair. That'll be something that comes back later on. I just, you know, this episode, it's so good, but also like, man, it's just so out there, for this season. It's such an out there episode compared to everything else. Like everything else is a little more grounded in reality. This one, it's like they do what we're all thinking, I guess, with parking in the handicap spot. Like, oh, is it going to matter or whatever? And it matters, but then the crowd like destroys the car. And I don't know. It's like them talking about George's dad while he's receiving an award for being so like good at handling like cases with handicapped people and helping them out and everything like that. The award's taken away because the police come in and, the George getting the car destroyed in the handicap spot comes kind of full circle at the worst moment. So it's one of those things where like, it's just so out there and ridiculous, but it is funny. So I'm going to put it at high B. It's not the best. It's not the worst. The pilot 1 and 2. Now this is interesting. It's very interesting the way this one kind of ranks and rates because it's like it's kind of out there and weird too, but it comes full circle in this like big culmination. You see all the characters throughout. It's like kind of like a celebration of every character that was in this season, and they all have funny moments in part 2. Part 1, the pilot's getting set up and everything. So I actually genuinely enjoyed this episode a lot. Probably going to put it in the middle of A. The pilot part 2, it's good. It's not anything that I would, really write home about. Probably in the middle of B because I do like the callbacks and things. I do like to see the whole thing play out. And then it sets up the stage for the rest of the series and the show from here on out because it kind of closes what a legendary season was, season 4, but then takes it to a different area because also, once they close the chapter on the pilot and the show, then you can move forward with the rest of the show and kind of do other things, which is great. They don't hang their hat on that too much. The pilot part 1, awesome. You can see the characters kind of going through it. The fake like sitcom characters and the actual characters. The like George and him thinking he had lupus and all that. There's also great moments throughout this where George is talking to a therapist and, every time the session ends, he storms out angrily, but he keeps going back. That's something that's been subtle but awesome also. I absolutely love that. But yeah, this is kind of where it sits for me. This was a very legendary, incredible season, and I would highly encourage you all, if you can, to watch it from episode 1 until the last episode, 24, I believe, because there's so much you'll get, so much you'll appreciate about each episode, and then about each episode calling back and forth. The just masterfully crafted seasons. I feel bad because I imagine back in the day, you would watch the show every Thursday or whatever it was. If you missed a week, you'd be lost if you missed the wrong episode. Like if you missed the watch or something, and then you moved on to, another part where they're pushing the pilot forward or whatever, you wouldn't have any idea what's going on. And I think that's interesting now looking back where you can just kind of watch all the episodes in a row. But yeah, highly encourage you all to check this one out. I definitely think this is where it goes. 1 here. And then, we just kind of move down the list to the last one, which this is kind of like the dog episode from, I believe, season 3. It's just not very compelling to me. I'm not a huge fan of these two. But yeah, like I say, I think a lot of these episodes, even the mid-tier ones, stack up so well compared to a lot of other episodes. And this show is just incredible overall. But yeah, I appreciate you all for hanging out. Appreciate you checking this list out and ranking these things. If you have any input on Seinfeld or plan on watching this season, or you've watched it, you want to come back and say, hey, I really liked it or I really didn't like it or whatever, let me know. I'm always down to discuss these things. And if you have ideas for other things you want to see ranked or rated or whatever, please let me know. I'm always interested in doing more of this stuff. But yeah, that's what we got going on. Thank you so much again for being here, and I will see you in the next one.